Relativism is a response to absolutism. It says that there is no objective right or wrong with respect to norms and beliefs and behaviors, and diversity is an indication of this. Furthermore, it says we can't judge the rightness and wrongness of beliefs and norms and behaviors except from within the context of the culture within which they occur. This is what I would call a weak version of relativism. I think this came up in discussion last week. Uh, because it seems like there's a little bit of a contradiction in the textbooks about this, because I don't think it addresses this strong versus weak versions of relativism. This is a weak version of relativism because things aren't completely relative, because they're only relative to culture. But I think this weak version of relativism ultimately leads to a stronger version of relativism, which the stronger version of relativism would be that we can't judge the rightness and wrongness of beliefs at all. Which I probably gets to, at some point, you can't even call it relativism. It's not relative to anything. It's just chaos. It's amorality. But the reason I talk about this is because it seems like this could be a disadvantage, and I'm not getting. I'm going to talk about advantages before disadvantages, but. The weak version of relativism that says that you can only judge a culture from within that culture is problematic, because how do we determine the boundaries between cultures? There's subcultures within cultures. What constitutes a culture? You know, if there's a disagreement and a moral issue between a subculture and the greater culture, which one's right? Is it just majority that decides? Can we only judge the subculture from within the subculture? And then what if there's just one rebel in that group? You know, all majorities probably at some point begin with a rebel. They begin with a minority. So, where does this begin and end? It seems like it just devolves into a kind of inability to assess rightness and wrongness of anything. So now I've said it, let's talk about advantages. The advantage is that we don't need to figure out and establish objective principles of right and wrong, and it seems like that's critical, because when we talk about absolutism, that's a big problem. We can't establish principles of right and wrong the same way we can establish the chemical composition of that rock over there, or the sum of 2 plus 2. It also seems like relativism leads to tolerance. If I can't judge the rightness and wrongness of that culture's beliefs, then I'm more likely to tolerate them. But relativism has serious disadvantages, as you can probably guess. The first one isn't, I don't think it's as serious as other ones. It says that if everyone must practice tolerance, which seems to be a precept of relativism, then doesn't that make tolerance a universally correct principle? I think relativists would probably say that's, well, I grant you that tolerance can be taken kind of as a universal principle, but beyond that, that principle leads to the conclusion that there aren't objective right and wrong principles, that we have to tolerate all views because there is no objective right and wrong. But that just seems illogical, because if tolerance is a universal principle, what do I say about cultures that are intolerant? Do I say that, well, it's okay that they're intolerant even though tolerance is a universally correct moral principle? That seems like a contradiction. I think a worse problem for relativism is that there do seem to be common views of right and wrong from culture to culture. So if diversity is an indication that there is no objective right and wrong, what does similarity indicate? Does it not indicate that there are objective principles of right and wrong? Using that kind of line of reasoning, well, if diversity is an indication of this, wouldn't commonality be an indication of this? The next issue is that relativism could be said to commit the fallacy of affirming the consequent. Charles S. talks about this on Digital Media Ethics on page 185, one of our textbooks. And I covered fallacies in the Critical Thought and Analysis lecture, and I left affirming the consequent out because I knew I'd be talking about it in this lecture. Now, I'm going to say that I don't think relativism necessarily commits the fallacy of affirming the consequent, and I talk about this as we move on and try to refigure the argument so that it's a valid argument and does not commit affirming the consequent. But let's start by talking about affirming the consequent, not get ahead of ourselves. Affirming the consequent follows this logical format: if P, then Q, Q, therefore P. So affirming the consequent means that I'm putting the Q, or the then part, before the if in my argument. I'm saying if P, then Q, P, or Q, that's the consequent, then P. Let's look at an example, or let's look at the argument for relativism using this format. If there is no objective right and wrong, if there's no universal right and wrong, we can expect to find diverse values and beliefs. We do find diverse values and beliefs. Therefore, there is no universal right and wrong. Now, going through this quickly, this is a kind of characteristic of fallacies. They tend to sound true. That's why they're a problem. People make these arguments and think that they are logical, and they aren't. They're internally illogical. So what's wrong with this argument? If there is no universal right and wrong, we can expect to find diverse values and beliefs. We do find diverse values and beliefs, therefore there is no objective right and wrong. I'm saying that the then of this, that we do find diverse values and beliefs, comes before the if part, and that's not how conditionals work. That's not how if-then statements work. You say if P, then Q, P, therefore Q, not Q, therefore P. So let's look at another example to try to... The more examples you look at, the clearer this stuff becomes. So let's look at this argument. If I like Justin Bieber, then there are Justin Bieber posters on my bedroom wall. There are Justin Bieber posters on my bedroom wall. Therefore, I like Justin Bieber. So what's the problem with that? Well, I'm saying that if I like Justin Bieber, there are Justin Bieber posters on my bedroom wall. There are Justin Bieber posters on my bedroom wall. I'm not saying that I like Justin Bieber. I'm saying there are Justin Bieber posters on my bedroom wall. And so the problem with that is that I can't conclude that I like Justin Bieber because I have Justin Bieber posters on my bedroom wall, because it might be the case that I don't like Justin Bieber but still have Bieber posters on my wall. Like, say my sister, I have to move in with my sister, and she puts me up in my niece's room, and my niece sleeps in another room but tells me don't touch anything in my bedroom. So I'm stuck with Justin Bieber posters on my bedroom wall even though I don't like Justin Bieber. Now, I think we can change the relativist argument to a valid argument. And valid arguments are, I covered this in the Critical Thought and Analysis lecture, the arguments in which the conclusion necessarily follows from the premises, or if the premises are true, the conclusion necessarily follows. Now, I think you can make a modus ponens argument, that the valid form of modus ponens for relativism. And modus ponens is kind of like the valid counterpart of affirming the consequent. It goes if P, then Q, P, therefore Q. So I'm not affirming the consequent. I'm not affirming the Q before the P. I'm saying if P, then Q, P, therefore Q. That's valid. So let's look at another Justin Bieber argument. If Justin Bieber is awesome, then I like Justin Bieber. Justin Bieber is awesome. Therefore, I like Justin Bieber. Now, that's a valid argument. It's necessary that the conclusion follows from the premises. So let's look at relativism, a relativist argument using an argument for relativism using modus ponens. If there is diversity, there is no objective right and wrong. There is diversity, therefore there is no objective right and wrong. Now that's a valid argument. I think a good case can be made that it is unsound, though. And remember from the critical thought analysis lecture that a sound argument is one in which it's a valid argument in which the premises are all true. So I think a good case can be made that the first premise of this argument is incorrect, that if there is diversity, there is no objective right and wrong, because an absolutist would say that there's diversity, but that there is objective right and wrong. It's just that the diversity in cultures is the result of cultures deviating from the correct principles of right and wrong. Another major problem with relativism is that it leads to prima facie wrong conclusions, to conclusions that just are obviously incorrect, or just seem obviously incorrect on the face of it. Prima facie means on the face of it. For instance, it's targeting innocent civilians, firebombing, suicide bombing, burning and killing elderly people, women, children. It just seems like that's just wrong. And that judging that as such is permissible no matter what. It doesn't matter what another culture thinks about it. It doesn't matter if there's some diversity concerning that issue. It just seems like that's wrong, no matter the circumstance, for all people, all places, and all times. It's just this kind of gut feeling. And the counterpart to that is that since we can't judge the rightness and wrongness of beliefs, that we can't judge or behaviors, that we can't judge the rightness of actions. So Charles S. uses the example of Mother Teresa. So I don't alienate anybody. If you're Catholic, assume you're not Catholic, and assume that none of us are Catholic. And let's look at Mother Teresa and say that, well, from within her own culture, Mother Teresa did good things, but we can't really say universally that she did good things. It's just from within her culture, it was good. I can't say for myself whether it was good or not. And that just doesn't seem right. It just seems like regardless of the culture you're in or that she's from, that feeding and sheltering and nursing and clothing the poorest of the poor is just a good thing to do no matter what. Doesn't matter who that person is or where they come from. And finally, this is relevant to information ethics specifically. In the digital age, if we can't judge rightness and wrongness of beliefs and values and behaviors, then how can we establish any kind of meaningful ethical system or dialogue when so many cultures interact in a global community? And this goes back to the issue of tolerance. I believe Charles S. points this out, that it may seem like relativism leads to tolerance, but it also seems to lead to alienation, because if I won't be willing to meet on any kind of platform to discuss ethical differences with another culture if I say, well, just live and let live. You believe what you want to believe, and I'll believe what I want to believe. We're not going to meet together and try to work out the disagreement. We're not going to try to address, okay, how can we work on this? How can we have some kind of mutual relationship or mutual understanding despite the fact that we don't agree on this? Tolerance just doesn't seem to be enough to take care of that when you have markets and legal systems interacting in a networked global system.